somewhere between my desk and here, there's a wonderful sermon floating. I don't know what it is, but it seems to be a thing with me to lose the sermon on Sunday morning. So, we're going to wing it. But I really don't need, it might be better. I really don't need a sermon in front of me to be able to talk about the things that I want to talk about anyhow. My notes are very seldom more than 2 or 3 lines. During the past week, I had an opportunity to reflect upon the nature of the church, nature and the mission of the church. It was caused by an excellent reading of an excellent paper that was very enjoyable for me, given by one of our fellow clergymen, Dr. William Kutcher, who is the pastor of the Covenant Baptist Church, my home church. I told him afterwards, Bill, I'm glad to see they finally got a thinking preacher there. The man I grew up under was a very stimulating individual, Warner Cole. Some of you may have heard Dr. Cole preach years ago. He's one of the finest preachers I've ever heard, bar none. And Bill Kutcher apparently has the same kinds of ability, and it was exciting to me. And he made a couple of comments that just started my mind thinking. And it was interesting because as I was trying to draw together my thoughts for a Mother's Day sermon, and at the same time thinking about the nature of the church, it occurred to me that one of the things that's exciting to recognize is that the church is recognized as a feminine entity and referred to as mother. Every language that I know uses the church in the feminine. The Romance languages, I checked this with Jim Wolf, all of them are feminine. German, die Kirche, right? Feminine. What's Russian? Is it feminine, you remember, or masculine? Or do they have that in Russian? It would be Greek and feminine right on down the line. Now, isn't that interesting? Why do we refer to the church as feminine? Why do we talk about the mother church? Have you ever thought about it? Well, the Lutherans did a nice job. Chris told me and quoted from her Lutheran catechism that the church is the bride of Christ. And then apologized for using Christ because she would now say Jesus, but that's the way the Lutheran catechism runs, right? The church is the bride of Christ. Well, I was juggling all these thoughts together, and it suddenly occurred to me that when we begin to talk about what a church ought to be, we are talking at the same time about what a parent ought to be. And when we're understanding the accurate meaning of parenthood, we're talking about the nature of the church. And so I would like to do a tension between them and some parallels and go from that particular point. One of the most exciting phrases that Bill Kutcher used in his message, which he did not develop, but I would like to pause on, is that it is the role and the duty of the church to make people safe for questions, not questions safe for people. We kind of went back on that. Let me repeat it. It is the role and the function of the church to make people safe for questions, not questions safe for people. Now, what happens in many of our churches? We'll get to mothers in a moment. What happens in many of our churches? Many of our churches are built upon the lowest common denominator, whereby if anything will upset any member of the church, it's cast out. Theology is a tool, a means of bringing people together and giving them a feeling of doing something without accomplishing anything. Theology is merely a building means, and it has nothing to do with whatsoever with asking people to rethink their existence. So constantly, I wouldn't ask a question like that, they say. I wouldn't approach something like that. It might upset some members of my congregation. And so we keep going and running all of the realities of life through the mixer and grinder and create a pablum that has no taste, no color, no understanding of anything, and feed it like to a baby. And that is the state of religion in the majority of places today. We are so interested in making things safe for our people that we fail to understand that people live in a real world where the questions cannot be screened, but have to be faced. When a neighbor indicated that a new minister in their church said from the pulpit, "I will enjoy things with you and do things with you, and in absolutely anything that's happy, participate. But if you have a problem, if there's somebody in the hospital, if you're facing death or somebody dies, don't call me," you begin to understand what I mean about the inability to apply to the significant events of life the questions of life. What do you do on the other hand? The church ought to be so stimulating and building and pouring into its individuals that no question is out of bounds, no question is unholy, no question dare not be asked, but the power and the ability of God through the individual enables him to face every question, whether he can answer it or not. There are no unholy questions, there are only unholy answers. And the unholiest of all is to say that is not a valid question. And so it seems to me that as we try to understand what's happening in the church, that more and more we ought to be expanding our horizons, talking with each other, scratching our heads and nodding them and trying to know what it takes to ask the right kinds of questions and searching to find the answers together. And those are the hard questions of life as well. Why is this happening to me? Why am I going through this? Is there no way I can ward it off? What kind of rule does fate have in my life that will not enable me to live like I want to, but continually forces me into paths that I have to struggle to overcome? Now, when you look at that particular kind of a thing, aren't you talking about what a creative parent is? There are approaches to parenthood that refuse in any manner, shape, or form to permit the children as they're growing up to face any unhappiness. We shield them. We don't want them to be hurt. We don't want them to go through what I've gone through. Well, good Lord, what you went through made you what you are today. That's the exciting part. Your bad experiences are every bit as much a part of your existence as your good ones. But we want to be shielded as though somehow or another, if we can save our children from having to face the difficult tasks of life, we will protect them. Until they get on an age when they step out on their own and your shield isn't there, and then they're hit like a thunderbolt because the world which has been presented to them during their growing up years is not the world into which they must step. This is not to say that there isn't a growing teaching process. One of the fundamental things that the church has to recognize is that questions are all legitimate, but not for every age group. It would be rather stupid for me to go down into the nursery and talk about Kierkegaard, Kant, and the philosophical approach of religion from the German theological school. They wouldn't know who Kierkegaard was. They wouldn't know who Kant was. They don't know who the Germans are. They don't know what theological is. They don't know what philosophical is. And why talk to them about it? Might be every bit as stupid to do it in this congregation, because I don't know all about Kierkegaard, Kant, and the philosophical, you know. Am I right? I mean, what you do is a basic law of all teaching and understanding is you start where people are and you help them to grow. If our American foreign policy were to understand this, half of our problems in the world would be solved in terms of America. We fly into an area that's beginning to use sticks to plow, set down a huge jet plane, bring off these huge tractors and everything else and say, now plow your fields. Yeah. It's incredible. If you've ever traveled in the Near East, to step off a giant plane traveling 600, 700 miles an hour and watch a donkey caravan going by and say we're trying to put the two together. We're trying to take the guy driving the donkey and make him a pilot in a jet plane without ever being able to take the steps in between. That's not what I mean. I realize you do protect, you do help, you do guide, and you struggle as a parent on how you let your child reach out and burn themselves on a stove that's hot enough to burn them and teach them not to touch hot stoves but not hot enough to hurt them. Right? You struggle with that as you seek to raise a child, but at the same time, the plea is that as you prepare the child to deal with the burned hand, even if it is a seriously burned hand, you prepare them to deal with life. You prepare the child to face life. You cannot change life to face the child. You prepare the child to stand creatively no matter what comes upon the sound foundations of your own giving to the child. You don't recreate a world and change it so that the child will be happy. Now, you may be working on the world too, but realistically, you're not going to change an awful lot. So I would say in the very first place, as we're talking about it, that the church has a function to prepare people to stand up under life no matter what comes their way, with a strong understanding and dedication of themselves, reaching out triumphantly, and that I, as a parent, have a strong inclination to identify my task to provide my children with the same kinds of strength and knowledge and understanding that no matter what beats at their door, they will find within themselves and their tradition a loving relationship that will enable them to overcome it. Be good parents and be good church people. Now, a second point that Bill raised in his interesting little bit is an old point, but it's one that I think is extremely important in terms of what we've been saying. Dr. Kutcher said it's the role, and this is not his terminology, he borrowed it, but I'd like to use it, you all know it. It is the role of the church to afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. It is the role of the church to afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. Now that's an interesting kind of an approach too. Let's pause and just kind of think about it for a moment. We have in the past few months been talking about change. Without change, there is death. Death is the absence of change, primarily. Which means that our theology must be in flux. Our living is in flux. Our home is in flux. Our understanding is in flux. Our personal relationships are continually in flux. They must be if they're going to be realistic. I can't think of any of you who for more than about 5 minutes would like to suffer no change. You'd go nuts. The most devastating thing in the world is to be put into a situation where there is basically no change. The isolation of a cell, solitary confinement, is devastating, not only because it cuts off an individual from other individuals, but it puts them in a situation where there is no change. And if you've ever read the accounts of people who have been through that kind of imprisonment, they play all kinds of games to change things. They'll stand here for a while because that wall looks a little different. They'll stand here. They'll scratch on the wall. They'll do anything. They'll measure. They'll count. They'll play all kinds of games, transferring things around to recognize change so that they know they basically are still alive. Now there is an opportunity in human life, particularly the religious life, which proclaims a particular truth, not to change. To get so comfortable with the approach to life and the way we live it in our religious communities that we just sit back and smile and say, ain't we the best? The role of prophetic religion at that particular point is to take a very hard look and to dig in on each and every one of us. And I consciously, if you walk out of this service and don't feel a pinch somewhere, either you're not listening or I'm not doing my job. You ought to feel a little daggers. You ought to feel a little scrape down your back. It just makes you uncomfortable for a moment. You ought to feel that as you walk out, something has been said that challenges you to make the kind of change that creatively moves you into a better existence. An understanding of husband and wife and mother and child and father and child and grandparent and friend and neighbor and a whole host of other relationships. And so we work on it. There is a point where we take all of our comforts and hold them out before ourselves and try to see what are solid understandings of life and what are mere balloons, protections, trying to keep us from ourselves. It's extremely important. And we afflict ourselves carefully, bursting the balloons and helping us to go. But there is a time when the world is shattering around you. And that's when the priestly role of religion comes in. When you are so uncomfortable that there is nothing that isn't changing. Because the other extreme is as bad. Eric Toffler in Future Shock talks about the rate of change and the inability of the average person to keep up with it. There is not a field of endeavor that isn't changing so fast, with the exception of religion, that the people in it can't keep up. The reason we get more and more and more and more specialized is because at the rate of change it's going, nobody can master all the knowledge anymore. The medical field, the mathematical field, the scientists, the engineers, everything coming down lower and lower and lower and lower and lower. Smaller pieces, because the rate there means that you spend all the free time you got just keeping up at that point. When the world is going to pieces and exploding before you, you don't need a prophet to come in and say, I told you so, look at here, you still got this left, and poke a hole in it. You don't need somebody to take the last foundation you've gotten or hanging on to and blow it up in your face and say, there, now you are truly afflicted. That's what Job's friends did. Job stood there, having lost his family, having lost his home, having lost everything that was his, and his well-meaning friends came, and the only thing that Job had to hang on to was the fact that Job stood there knowing that he had sought to do that which was right. And his well-meaning friends came in and said, Job, what sin did you commit to cause all this to happen to you? What a horrible thing to do! The last thing that the man had to hold on to, his friends wanted to kill for him and shatter. And the priestly function of religion is to come in at that particular point and to surround as a church, as believers, as friends, as counselors, as helpers, an individual, and help them to put it all back together. To love. To pour so much love into an individual that regardless of how big the cavern is, it's filled and they begin to appreciate themselves. That's what the church is all about. Now think about yourselves as parents. You got a kid that's flying along getting all A's. Are you satisfied with that, or do you know that he's not doing a bit of studying and what you've got to do is challenge him a little bit because he's going to get bored? He is so comfortable with the way he's doing things that you sort of sit back and say, gee, do I mess it up a bit, or do I really push him to develop his potential? If you're a wise parent, you probably recognize the kid's beyond you already. But you seek help. I want somebody to help me push my child so that his potential, not my potential, but his potential grows and grows. You don't want him to be so comfortable that life is knocked off easily. He becomes a con artist very easily that way. He learns to con people, to say the right kinds of things, and to manipulate them to do what he wants, and then he goes through life manipulating people and never accomplishing anything within himself or outside. And you know it, and I know it, and we've all seen it. So you move in carefully, tenderly, and lovingly and afflict a little bit to change so that that intelligent child stretches out in his own imagination and his own being and constantly finds the excitement of life so challenging that he continues to grow. You afflict him, uncomfortably so, but you afflict him because you know that's the only way he's going to grow. It's much easier for many of us, doesn't happen to be for me, to give pablum sermons. I don't like afflicting people necessarily, but I feel I need to be afflicted. So I afflict myself and invite you to sit in on it. But I feel it's necessary. And as a parent, I must constantly shatter the secure balloons carefully to cause things to grow. But when that child comes in, shattered because the whole world has collapsed, what do you do as a parent? Well, there are a lot of reactions. Don't be silly. Don't be silly. Love them. You pour love in. You don't say, don't be silly. Your friends will like you again. Because there's nothing more shattering to a young person, 4 or 5 or 6, to have a friend say, I don't like you anymore. That's the world being shattered. A 13-year-old daughter coming in and her first boyfriend has broken up with her thinks the world has come to an end. You laugh within yourself a little bit because you know at 13 you went through it, and 14 and 15 and 16 and 17 and 18 and 19 all the way on up, and the world doesn't end. But for that individual, they're shattered. Their existence is gone. You don't laugh at them and say, silly girl. You surround them with your love. You let them get it out. You help them to grow. And then as they become comfortable, you talk about it and say, this isn't the end of the world. Things happen. People change their minds. They say things that if you were to ask them later, they don't mean. And you make it an exciting experience. So I think the church and the parenthood at this point offer a very exciting kind of parallel. Afflicting the child, or afflicting the parishioner, or afflicting ourselves in this kind of a church where there's no real separation between pew and pulpit, as you found last week. and at the same time comforting. And it is a church function. It is not a priest or a preacher's function. The most exciting things that have happened in this church, in terms of people taking a look at themselves and getting it all together, has been a function of people in this church who have surrounded with love. And I will just say very personally that that's what happened to us. The times when we were down so much, this church functioned around us in a way that you will never know, and we can never say how much we appreciate. They did it. You did it. Individually, because you felt the need and stepped in. And there are hundreds of cases in the last 4 or 5 years that I could list, but won't, where we've done this for each other. And isn't that what a parent is? To love the unlovable and to comfort the uncomfortable, but to cause them to rise. One last thing very quickly. Oh, I'm still got 6 minutes. What do you mean? How long's the last hymn? 7. That's it. Go back to Plymouth. Okay. Second time this week I had my breath taken away. All right. One last very quick thing. And I think this is an extremely important part of the church, an extremely important part of the family, and that is to establish realistic hope. I have been studying for a whole host of reasons because at some point, and I'm not sure when, I thought I could and then I discovered I really couldn't. I either want to do a series of sermons, a series of study sessions, a series of people shows, or something on the concept of death or dying. Facing one's ultimate concerns, illness. We are probably going to move into that. We are now approaching a cancer group to have an individual with members of the family and members of this group to talk with me about what it's like when you suddenly discover you have cancer, you're facing these kinds of decisions, and how you deal with it. How you understand what your family can do, what goes on, and the horrible, horrible, horrible aloneness because so many of your friends don't know what to say, so they avoid you. Have you found yourself doing that? Next time you do that, kick yourself in the rump and step forward, not backward. Because what happens is that people who are in need and are beginning to face the horrible realities of their own life and their ultimate end in a conscious way find themselves left more and more alone because people don't know what to say to them, therefore say nothing. That's tragic. And as I've been studying and trying to understand this, a number of things have come and people have said things to me. And I've appreciated their concern. Some of them have been very helpful, and some of them so far from the reality that it's impossible to understand it. I prayed last night, and I know your eyes are going to be cleared up, your diabetes is going to go away, and you will have no more problems. I know it. I'm glad you know it, sweetheart, because I don't. That's unrealistic. That is not a hope. That is a hoax. That is building a foundation that does not stand on anything that is real in the world. Now, what the church must do is not build a hoax. It must understand our existence together based on our understanding of life and our realities of life, but hold out always the hope that things can be better. Isn't that important? Strengthening an individual to go through, strengthening an individual to face, strengthening an individual to know within himself what's happening, and hold out the hope that regardless of what happens based on that strength, you can accept and overcome and make real. The problem with so much of religion is pie in the sky. Doesn't matter what's going on now, in some future way you're all going to be paid better, which doesn't help you a bit. Now, a good parent, seems to me, does the same thing. A good parent, as I understand the parent, holds out to the child an expectant hope. It does not say to a child who is blind, you will become a great artist. It doesn't deny it. It just doesn't make that the realistic hope. It would be foolish to hold out that kind of a goal to a child who doesn't have the abilities to do it. But the hope that a child receives from the parents is no matter who you are or what you are, you will fulfill yourself and will make us happy. When's the last time your parents ever said to you, I'm really pleased with what you're doing? When's the last time your parents ever said to you, you know, you've made us very, very happy by being what you are? When's the last time they said, we love you regardless of what you've done, but you have filled all of our expectations primarily because you've been what you have to be, and we appreciate it. Okay, now ask yourself the same question. When's the last time you said that to your kids? When's the last time you really said to one of your children, I don't always agree with what you do, but I am so delighted at watching and participating and loving you that it's exciting. When's the last time you said, our hopes for you are being fulfilled as you grow in understanding of yourself, and thank you for that? When's the last time? Well, don't let the day go by. Because as a parent, as a church, we have to say, our hopes for Pine Hill are growing. We've had everything in this church go wrong that could possibly go wrong, including a whole host of people that were the I told you so's pointing the finger at Joe. We have slaved, we have wept, we have cried, we have leaned on each other's shoulders, we have commiserated, we have sat down, and it's been so helpful to me to have somebody else say, hey, I know what's going on around here. It isn't going very well, but hang in there because we are going to establish the hope and carry it through. And some of you sitting here have been in to see me on that. And we're making it, aren't we? We're making it because we held out the dream and we kept saying to ourselves, we can do it. Hold out the dream for your kids. Let them know that they can do it. But remember, not only do you have an obligation to be good parents and pour into your children, reflect back. Regardless of what your parent has been to you, reflect back your own ability to love. It's difficult. But hold out that hope and share it. Did you look at the top of the bulletin? Happy he with such a mother. Faith in womankind beats with his blood, and trust in all things high comes easy to him. May that be from Alfred Lord Tennyson, a statement that our children can make about us, and you can make about our church.